Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got healed through the Sinclair Method and how you rewired your brain to be happy when you're not drinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was a daily drinker, bottle of wine during the week, and then weekends usually just kind of free for all day, both days. And Mondays were always really, really rough. And was always looking for an answer. I literally tried to quit drinking probably dozens of times, and I'd make it a few days or a couple weeks or a couple of months. Once I made it 6 months. But when I was quitting all of those different times, I always knew in the back of my mind that I would drink again. Like, if I'm honest with myself, I knew it was just a matter of when it would be, kind of believing that if I was able to prove to myself that I could be sober, that, like a lot of us, we think, oh, okay, yeah, I can moderate my drinking now. But I kept trying to quit and would always return back to alcohol. And it seemed to just be getting worse with every year that I was stuck. Like, Chris, you called it a trap. I love to call it a trap as well, because it's really what it is. And it was getting worse year over year, to where I was doing riskier things, putting myself in riskier situations, drinking harder alcohol. Like, I was turning to whiskey a lot more often, or wine and whiskey. And so it was just getting worse and worse. And earlier in the call, John, you mentioned about how, people who might feel like their fate is alcohol addiction. And that's honestly what I felt right before I got to the Sinclair Method was, I guess I'm just going to be, an alcoholic for the rest of my life. I can't get out of this. Like, I've tried so many different times. There's, people in my family. I was just thinking, well, maybe this is my fate in life. And I was kind of accepting it. But then, one hungover morning, I was scouring the internet once again for some answers, and I would always listen to sober stories from people in AA or other people who had found, their way out. And I would get inspired by them, but that inspiration would fizzle out and the craving would kick in and I would return to drinking again. So that one particular day, though, I found Claudia's TED Talk and, learned about Claudia Christian, learned about the Sinclair Method. And it took me a couple months to find the medication. And once I started on it, I saw an immediate difference, like within the first week, to where, previous to the Sinclair Method, alcohol-free days were very hard for me. And I would usually force them and white knuckle them and just do them out of a sense of guilt. Like, I need to have a day without alcohol because it's been, weeks or months. But that first week, I was able to have my first alcohol-free day that was uncomfortable. Like, I could have still drank, but that craving was much less. And I took myself after work. Like, I live in a coast town, so I went to the beach and I just was like, this is crazy. I'm not drinking tonight. And it doesn't feel like I'm, totally tortured by it. And just, from there, it just kept improving little by little by little. And that's the thing with the Sinclair Method. I think sometimes people get on it thinking it's going to be this overnight shift or this pill's going to fix everything. But I was on the method for a full year, and it was just week over week, these gradual improvements I would see that, I was thinking about alcohol a little less often. I could no longer finish a bottle of wine, or a few months in, I no longer wanted to drink at home alone anymore. I only wanted to drink socially. It just didn't appeal to me. And so over the course of a year, it just gradually, my alcohol kept gradually reducing, to the point where at a year, I ultimately stopped drinking just because I genuinely lost all interest in alcohol. But throughout that time, I was also, actively seeking out things in life that would give me enjoyment and meaning, because what I realized was alcohol was my purpose. I was living for that drink and I didn't even realize it, but I was thinking about alcohol starting at 11 a.m. every day, looking forward to that wine ritual every night, and truly just living for it. And so as that became a smaller part of my life, I realized, oh my gosh, I've got to fill this with something, because it is, I still have this choice to drink, which I see people on the Sinclair Method, they'll drink out of habit, even though they don't really want to. It's like they don't know what else to do with their time, or they're bored, or they're sad. And so they just keep turning to alcohol. But we've got to proactively kind of challenge ourselves a little bit to try new things. Like, I didn't even know what my likes were or my enjoyments were. So I kept trying all these things. I went to the store and literally got paint and was just like painting a picture. I'm a terrible artist, but I was like, well, this is what I did when I was little. Maybe I'll enjoy it now, But that is such a crucial part of this process, because I think one of the biggest challenges I see with people on the Sinclair Method is they get the medication and then they're only taking the medication, which is a crucial part, but they're not doing the other side of it, which is truly creating this life that we no longer want to run away from with alcohol. Because by the time I reached extinction, which was about 8 months in, I was still drinking like once or twice a month, but it was like to have a glass of wine out with dinner. It wasn't because I had a bad day, because by that time I had learned new ways to cope with bad days. And so that was my journey through the method, and why I appreciate both of your perspectives so much, because it is this holistic approach to it. Because, you know, we don't develop alcohol use disorder in a silo. It's something that, you know, interferes and interacts with all areas of our life. And alcohol is a very, you know, useful temporary coping tool, and a, you know, a habit of, that was one of the biggest things I realized too, how much I was drinking habitually. And so it's more complex than just taking a pill and, you know, kicking back and letting it do all the work. But the Sinclair method, like, I don't think I would be sober today if not for that, because like I said, I tried dozens of times over the course of a decade. It really did repair my brain and my craving, to where today it's been 3.5 years since I drank. And if I smell alcohol, I somewhat gag in my throat. I'm just so repulsed from it. And as opposed to like, oh, wishing I could have it. So that's my story with the method.
Well, Katie, that's really wonderful. You know, my patients that take naltrexone, they oftentimes will get a response, but they won't keep doing it for the 8 months. How did you get the encouragement to take it for 8 months? How did you get the other helps that you need besides just having the prescription? Was it just things that you read on the internet? How'd that work for you? Was there a community that you knew of that could help you?
I see that is like one of the biggest challenges I see with the Sinclair Method community and people on it, is that they'll get on the medication, it's working, and then they stop taking it, or they're not 100% consistent with taking it, which is crucial to the method. And so I see people have that challenge, and then they, you know, stop taking it a few times, and then they're finally ready to commit. So, you know, it is possible for them to get to that place. But for me, I would say the things that were driving me most were my internal motivation to change. Like, I was genuinely becoming afraid of what alcohol was doing in my life. I almost got a DUI. I'd kind of wrecked my car, like here and there, hitting curbs and stuff, drinking and driving. I would do that. When I was sober, I would say, oh, I would never do that. But once I got drinking, I would, you know, not have the right judgment. So I was genuinely afraid of the consequences that were happening in my life. And I focused on those like every day. I made them a very big part of my reality of like, this is what's going to happen if you don't get this fixed. And then I was also really excited about my future. Like, alcohol had always felt like this major barrier to like all of these dreams that I had deep down inside me that I really wanted to do, like small and big things, like being, you know, energized on a Saturday morning and going to get coffee at a coffee shop, and, you know, just like little things that alcohol was preventing me from doing. And so for me, it was like constantly keeping in my conscious awareness the life I wanted to have, and like the reality of what would happen if I didn't change. And, you know, through trying to quit dozens of times, I did have tools like, you know, just psychological tools. I'm an avid reader and learner, so I'm constantly consuming information to inspire me and help me improve, like a lot like Chris. And so that is the piece of it that I think is so important for people, and that sometimes people miss. It's like if we're not thinking about our future and getting excited about it, or really honest with ourselves about the reality of what's going to happen if we don't change, then in those moments where we're feeling tempted or exhausted or angry or whatever, like we can just decide to, I'm not going to take the pill today. But it's those tiny decisions that really, you know, they add up to huge change and improvements, or they add up to quote unquote failure, in my opinion.
So one of the things that I am so thrilled to be with the two of you is you two have helped hundreds and hundreds of people. I have no idea how many people have benefited from your work to help them. And I would think that would help you maintain your desire to live a healthy life and to be free. Is that really been the way it's been? Am I just assuming that, Chris and Katie?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it's totally surreal to me, and I don't know an exact number. I hope it's you know, substantial at this point, but yeah, it's one of those things where when I'm having coffee in the morning, watching the sunrise, this is facing somewhat east, so it's a great place to be in the morning. The dogs come in. I got two rescues, little pit bull mixes who are basically stuffed animals, and they hang out, and I'm sipping my coffee, and I'm thinking, what a contrast from when I used to work in a job that wasn't for me. You know, I'm not going to put down finance. I have friends who are cut out for finance. I'm not. I'm not very good in a lot of things. I don't hear well, actually. If I were a waiter, I would get fired. I would mess up people's orders. So it's totally surreal to me that I even have a career, so to speak. But you know, the fact of the matter is that it's not about me at all, which really takes off a lot of pressure, because back then it was about me and about me counting beans, and you know, essentially what I was doing in a glamorous way. And it was stressful. And now I get to think, well, at least I get to have peace with the universe. I feel a sense of alignment with the cosmos. I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and I can kind of get into a flow state and try to live in the space of intention, as Wayne Dyer used to say. Matt Finch recommended his book. It might be called Intention. It's the Power of Intention. I've been reading that. I like to read a good self-help book every now and then to stay energized. So it's a process for sure. But at the end of the day, there's so much alignment when you're helping other people. I think, you know, a lot of people are successful. And I've had a lot of clients, private coaching clients with huge amounts of money, and they'll throw it at the problem. And that's fine to start with. But if you don't have fulfillment, which you can only get, in my opinion, by helping other people, then you're missing out. And so I think there are all of these metrics of success and happiness that I was obsessed with before I quit drinking, where, you know, at the time, if you'd ask me, what does success look like? I'd say I'd be on a beach drinking a margarita, you know, with millions and billions and trillions of dollars in the bank, and wouldn't have a care in the world. And the reality of the situation is, even if I had achieved that, my liver would be, you know, having a hard time. I'd have brain fog. I wouldn't even if I had $1 trillion in the bank, I wouldn't be able to go get a cup of coffee on a Saturday morning and feel good, unless I put a bunch of Irish cream or whatever in there, and then had to go home and take a nap, and, you know, just have horrible sense of, you know, very bad sense of well-being. So at this point, I'm just extremely grateful. I think I'm sorry for this long-winded answer, but that's kind of how I feel about it. I have fulfillment doing what I do, and you know, it's totally surreal to me, as I said.
No, I
How
just
about you,
wanted to,
Katie?
yeah, I just appreciate that question so much, John, because absolutely, like, having my YouTube channel and, you know, just being able to help others, like Chris said, like, it gave me such purpose and meaning in life, where, you know, I never had that before in my different career paths either. And so I totally agree 100% with what you said, Chris, about helping others is where we get our most fulfillment, whether you're a mother or a volunteer or your career allows you to do that. I think that's such an important component. I read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and that just, while I was on the Sinclair Method, and that really like hit home for me about the importance of having meaning in our life and purpose. And I can genuinely say, for nearly 10 years when I was struggling with alcohol, like, I didn't really have that. And so if we don't have that meaning or purpose or direction, it's so easy to stay stuck in the alcohol trap. Did you have meaning before that, Chris, or, you know, fulfillment or hobbies, or was drinking your hobby?
It was very odd, because I had very close friends who some of them are still my best friends to this day. Now, I had a lot of drinking buddies who I had to dispense with, but I say that because I think the closest thing I had to meaning before was those relationships. And I still believe, you know, the quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. So that meant something. But apart from those friendships, which were very deep, and I've always had a great relationship with my parents, I'm adopted, and that's a whole nother thing. But I always felt lucky, and like there had to be a purpose to life, but I had no idea what mine was. And like you, I was starting to accept the alcoholic label. When you were talking about that before, it occurred to me that one night I was researching on Google, you know, what if I drink too much? You know, all these things that maybe we type in, how much is too much? Trying to find countries where the drinking guidelines were higher, so maybe I could like move there and be normal. And that's actually what gave me the impetus to start a blog at some point, because I was like, those search results suck, and I want to make something that's more informative for people. But back then I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm just an alcoholic. My purpose in life is to suffer. Who knows? And maybe I get a fleeting high at the end of each day. Maybe that's good enough. That was all I had in terms of purpose. And then the material things that I didn't get to that point. I mean, I was still in my 20s when I quit finance. And, you know, I was looking at all of these people who were somewhat role models, making ridiculous sums of money. And I thought, well, maybe when I get there, I'll figure it out, which is the classic fallacy when you're trying to define your own happiness. So it was really, in retrospect, the scariest thing I ever did was quit drinking and enroll in that detox center, because I knew it would mean that the people at my job would not have me back. And that's exactly what happened. But at the same time, it was the most important thing I ever did, because it simplified everything. It stripped away all of the superfluous elements of my life so that I could finally start at least earnestly seeking that which would make me fulfilled later on. And it took a while. I didn't feel fulfilled maybe 4 to 6 months after quitting, but I felt like I was getting closer. So I think there is a huge persistence aspect there.
What's the secret that kept you committed? Like, that's like the thing that the code I can't crack with people. It's like how to get them to that place where they're committed to, no matter what, to, find that fulfillment or purpose.
For me, I like to call it internal spark or internal fire. And I don't know if it can be defined in a blanket way or universally, but it's the same sense of sacredness that I think people can understand when they think about their children or their relationship with their best friend or their relationship with their parents. Whatever that sacred quality is, you have to be able to apply it to yourself. And from that, you can start to do things that might seem, as my ethics professor in college would say, like a supererogatory act, something that can't rationally be demanded of someone as a Kantian obligation, something superhuman. You can come up with an effort that could be described that way only if you have that deep, sacred sense of your own worth, really. But it's deeper than your own worth. It's like, it's a faith, maybe a leap of faith, that there is a reason that you're in the universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to say something that came to mind as you were talking about that is like what I realized in part of my healing journey through the Sinclair Method was when I was drinking like I genuinely didn't have respect for myself, and I used alcohol as a way to like punish myself in some sense, like, or just show the lack of respect I had for myself. And so I remember on this journey getting to this mindset, what helped me was like, okay, treat yourself like someone you respect. And so day to day, I would, in order to practice self-care or just, focus on making progress on this journey, it was like, okay, how would I treat my mom or my sister or my best friend? And I would treat myself that way as a way to kind of learn how to be kind to myself, as opposed to these self-destructive cycles that were, going on forever. Because I still turned to those a lot. And I literally had to learn how to be respectful toward myself, because I had never really done that before.